All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Expanding Outreach for Scalable Success, Multi-Supplier Business Reviews. We'll take a deep dive into Massachusetts' Silver Cronin Award-winning project. I want to thank you personally for spending some time with us today. We're really glad you're here. This is the first webinar in this year's Cronin webinar series, and you can register for the others by visiting naspo.org and clicking on the Events and Webinars tab. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. You can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenters a question directly, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions will be addressed at key points in the presentation and afterwards in a Q&A session. At the close of today's presentation, you'll be asked to complete a very brief questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO, so please feel free to share your opinions with us. Today's presentation is good for one contact hour. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. On to our presenters. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today. We are honored to have with us Anne-Maria Bennett. She is a Director of Category Management with Massachusetts Operational Services Division, where she helped lead the implementation of this exciting new approach to the business review process. And Amanda Ferdinand, a Senior Category Manager with Massachusetts Operational Services Division, where she oversees teams that conduct these business reviews. NASPO is very excited to have you ladies with us today, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda, to get us started.
Thank you. So we're very eager to share our findings with our business review. Previously, for the challenges that we were facing, we had more of a one-on-one format with our vendors. And actually, I'm going to go off camera. That's going to be easier. So we had a one-on-one format with our vendors, and in doing so, within a year, we will only have 36 individual vendor business reviews. So that's less than 5% of our contracted suppliers for our pool of vendors. And with this challenge, we realized that we weren't tapping into the full scope of our vendor pool, and it wasn't providing enough opportunities for our category managers to interact with our vendor pool. So as to why the business reviews interactions are necessary is because we ensure our supplier compliance is met with our key performance indicators and contract terms. So this is regarding sales reporting, admin fee, diverse expenditure with our supplier diversity office. And then we also wanted to ensure that we're getting feedback from our buyers. This is an opportunity for our vendor to share any issues that they're facing and our buyers to share any issues that they're facing under the contract with that particular vendor. And these were challenges that we were facing when we still had a one-on-one format, one vendor to our category management team. In addition to that, we also wanted to talk on the discussion of the industry and contract challenges, which we got into a little bit, and then the opportunities of growth for our contracts and opportunities for our buyers regarding our vendor pool and their products that they are offering. So in addition to that, it does not include ample participation from our key internal and external stakeholders. That being said, that when it is a one-on-one format, you're not getting everything that you would want to be getting with a bigger pool. So for this one-on-one format, we would get a very small scope of our stakeholders. So we wanted to open that up a little bit. Lastly, for our team, we had 9 category managers at the time when we were doing this format of one vendor to one category manager. And you can imagine that that's really hard to increase the frequency of our business reviews because we were doing them every quarter per category manager. And so that was with our challenges that we were facing, that we only got to meet with 36 individual vendor suppliers. On the next slide, we're going to talk about how the vendor selection occurred. So as I was talking on the previous slide, that we have a pool of 1,200 vendors plus. And you can imagine with only meeting 36 of them for a fiscal year isn't ideal. We want to get more information from our vendors to touch all of them in the scope of the 1,200, or at least try to. So how we were selecting our vendors previously, we were doing a single vendor under one contract, or we were doing a single vendor under multiple contracts, because some of our vendors cross over scopes of our contracts. So they could be on an IT contract, they could be on a office supplies contract, for example. And so we would come in and meet with them and their stakeholders and bring our stakeholders into the one-on-one business review. We would also identify vendors at this time that would provide strategic products and services to us. So something that's really like a hot topic or in high demand, that we would identify a vendor to meet with us and discuss this, or any issues that we're facing with that product, or we want to get it on contract. Another aspect that we utilized to identify our vendors was high volume and high spend for transactions. And so you can imagine that this is not meeting the full scope of our pool, because we don't have, every vendor is a high volume spend or volume in sales or transactions. So when you only identify the high vendor count for that you can definitely lose out on the opportunities for those other vendors that want to increase their sales. Another aspect that we were selecting our vendor pool on was environmental impact. We have a robust climate and sustainability unit in the Commonwealth for the operational services division. And so we work really closely to talk about that per business review. But you can imagine with only having one single vendor to category management team, there's only so much that you can talk about when it comes to the environment and to get the feedback of the industry that's only coming from one vendor. And then in addition to that, experiencing multiple compliance issues. So anything that comes up from our buyer aspect or that's coming up that we need to talk about when it comes to our KPIs, we would identify vendors that way, that we would be able to resolve those in person, because these one-on-one vendor business reviews were all in person. So as you can imagine, this approach to vendor selection allows these strategic vendors to drive decision-making while allowing few opportunities for smaller, less strategic firms to exchange feedback with our team. So we figured that we needed to change our process. In order to do that, we were thinking of that we need to be able to hear from all our vendors. We want to be able to strengthen our vendor relationship across all our contracts and the vendor pool that is provided to us. So in addition, we had a need for greater understanding of vendor businesses, because if you're only seeking one vendor, then you're only going to hear from that one vendor and not multiple. So increasing the size of our business reviews, that was one of our objectives. And then when it comes to vendor feedback on how we can improve our contracts and make it easier for them to use it or utilize it, again, we're only hearing from one vendor at a time. So that's 36 vendors per year. And then in addition, for the vendor that needs to hear the Commonwealth's feedback for anything that's a compliance issue or anything that we're seeing that's like customer service related, they're only going to hear it in this one-on-one session or through email or phone call. Like, it's not as personable like we would want it to be. And the need to discuss with vendors the performance of their contract. So what I was saying earlier with their sales reporting or their admin fee payment to utilize our contracts, or their diverse expenditure that they have to meet with spend that they have for their diverse vendors that they work with, that they have to make a percentage of per the year. We want to be able to communicate that, and we're only tapping into one vendor at a time. So we want to be able to increase our reach to be able to have these conversations with multiple vendors. And then we also wanted to learn more about the industry. So we're having a very narrow view coming from one vendor, and we want to increase that view. We want to learn about the best industry practices and the norms that they're seeing. So how are the other states approaching this issue? It's definitely not just unique to Massachusetts, and we wanted to learn from the private sector examples. And that's where we were able to identify a solution. And this solution came about increasing our business reviews to multiple suppliers. And at the time, and I know Andrea will be talking about this later, but at the time we did an integrated, like an increase. So we're going from 1 and jumping to 15. That would be a bit crazy for us. And we definitely are still at this time learning what we wanted to see from our business reviews and how we want to improve them. So we made a decision to go from one vendor for the start where we came from. And then for the first quarter, we're going to do 5. So we're going to include 5 vendors, invite them to a business review and conduct that. Second quarter, we're going to do 10, see how that feels. And go from there. And then the third quarter, we opted to 15 again, or 15 to bump it up to 15. And we felt that 15 might be a little bit too much for our category managers and to engage our vendors so they're willing to share. So we decided in Q4 that we'd go back to 10. And 10 seems to be a good number for us because we have engagement. People feel comfortable to provide us with additional information about their company and how their experience is going under the contract. So that was very important to us to find that happy number. And then to also include other units and agencies from our leadership and internal and external stakeholders. So you can imagine that a vendor coming onto this business review, because this was also held remote. So if they're coming into their business review and they just feel like overwhelmed how many people are on that, we just wanted to make sure that we narrowed down to if we're going to invite a buyer, that it's a buyer that's a high use, or if they have an issue that we can work through in our industry discussion, that's something that we can identify, but that they're not overwhelmed. So it's like a happy medium that we're trying to figure out at this point. And then we also want to discuss the sales and compliance data for all awarded suppliers on that contract. So we're just going to go through the compliance measurements, how much spends under the contract. But we also want to make sure that all our vendors, this information is provided to them under a unique identifier. And that is because we don't want them to feel embarrassed or say they're like a lower spend vendor. We don't want to make them feel embarrassed for that sake because they're still learning or they're new to the contract, and that can be a little bit of a pressure, or vice versa. If they are the highest one, we also don't want them to be gloating too much in that regard. So we just have to find a happy medium, and we felt that providing unique identifiers ahead of the business review was a good approach. And so they would know where they stand amongst the other vendors, but they wouldn't know amongst their peers. And then second to last is providing attending suppliers with indicators for the performance, which I was just talking about. So it's unique to them, and they can review it. And they also get the slide deck so they can review it at their own time. And then also during the focus of the industry discussion, this is among the attendees surrounding relevant industry topics. So this comes from us. Well, it's twofold. We send out a survey with our coordinators to the vendors to get any questions that they come and want to ask at this business review so we can incorporate those. But then we also have our own questions, and that's always shared in advance. So everyone knows that these are the topics that we're going to discuss so we can come prepared to this discussion, which is always important because then we can have a more robust discussion. And so how is this changing for our selection? So we started off with one-on-one vendor to category management business reviews. And now our approach is changing. So we wanted to identify obviously larger firms, but then also including smaller businesses, because we do have diverse businesses and small businesses that are on the smaller side. So it would only be fair to get a good ratio of that. So in our 10 that we ultimately end up going with, like for the number wise, we want to have a mixture of large firms, some small ones, and then potentially some zero, no sales, just so there's a mix. So there's opportunities for those vendors to learn from each other. And then also for diverse businesses, if they're interested in becoming a diverse business, they can also connect on that business review call. And then in addition to that is that we could dive into strategic product and servicing offers, and they can discuss among themselves and with us what's the next best thing. What's something that we're missing in our contract, or a category that's in our contract, or something that's not even in scope of our contract that we should be aware of and work on for our next rebid, or potentially a reopening, something that could really bring attention to where we're lacking. And then we also talk about the high sales under the contract. We talk about the no sales under the contract. For improvement, those vendors can also then learn from the other vendors on the call, if there are no sales vendor, on some strategies and how they can improve upon their contracts. That could be a question in the industry discussion if they provided to us in advance. And then also, if you're a new vendor to the Commonwealth, this is a good way to meet the other vendors in your industry. If you're truly very new to it, this is a good networking way of seeing what's going on in your industry. If you're missing anything, a learning opportunity. And then for returning vendors, this is just going to be establishing relationships with the Commonwealth. So a key focus of why this business review process was created was to improve our vendor relationship. And going from just one vendor to one category manager, we've been able to increase that. And so on this next slide, I'm going to be talking about the transition. So these are some questions that we wanted to explore and answer. And so for the first one, I'll dive into, but the second one you can read for yourself. How will we be able to share with each vendor their performance on the contract without their competitors knowing how well or badly they are doing? So that kind of goes back into that key, like unique identifier that I was talking about earlier. We share that in advance. We share the slide deck in advance, so people are prepared for what the numbers they're going to see, but they can only see their own because they only can identify themselves for that number. So it's equal playing field. No one knows who's who, and we can just have an open conversation from that point on. Especially when it comes to like sharing best practices, that could be coming from the highest spend vendor on the contract, and then that zero sales vendor could definitely learn from that. In addition, we also wanted to explore some other questions, which were, will vendors be able or be willing to talk about future plans and strategies with their competitors in the room? So this is an opportunity with our questions. We want to kind of be a little bit open-ended so that they can get going with their discussions, and that they have the opportunity to share. We just need to be making sure that it's not too narrow of a question where it pinpoints one vendor over another. And that's something that we just need to, when we're having these industry discussions, that we're leading the discussion along, and it's not just one vendor speaking over others. And sometimes that is how we navigate that, is that we assign questions in advance if we know that it's going to be a little bit of a quieter group. Sometimes from our experience thus far, we've learned that some IT contracts are a little bit quieter. Those vendors are a little bit quieter as compared to vehicle contracts and vendors that are selling vehicles. So it's just kind of who you're working with as a vendor and their appetite for discussing. And then on the next slide, we're talking about early changes. So that's where we came from, and we learned a lot throughout this process of some pain points and where we want to improve. And our group was able to move along in this process. And we held debriefs after every session to assess performance for the category manager and how to navigate issues that arose in the business review and any improvement to the slide deck or the questions that were asked, how to prompt vendors to get some answers from them if they're on the quieter side. And that's where we also decided that 15 vendors was too large of a group for us. So we felt really comfortable with that 10 vendor cap per business review. And we also found that, as I was saying earlier, combining smaller vendors and larger vendors can very much benefit us and the vendors discussion. And then another one is automating parts of the process to reduce preparation time for the team. So because this was a new process, it took us a longer time to like get the rhythm of it, but then we were able to incorporate our coordinators, and right now they just take it away right when we identify the contract and the vendors or the category that we want to operate in, and they're able to send out surveys, the invites, get it all out for us. And our team is then able to focus on our slide deck, getting our data validated, which is a new one for us right now, and just being able to work on inviting the vendors, making sure that they're aware of any questions that we come up with. And then another aspect of this, because we were kind of doing it on a survey base previously, was incorporating our buyers to be part of this conversation. That means actually inviting them. Some of our members of our strategic sourcing team, our SST team, being able to participate, ask questions. That's also a key highlight for the early changes, because we wanted to get more buyer feedback, and then also with their attendance, that puts our vendors on point with the, like being able to actually like kind of provide a background for their business and why they're a good vendor, and why they should be utilized in the future. So it's an opportunity for our vendors as well. And then also at the end, we were able to also get feedback from our attendees to stay relevant and add value. And I'm going to switch it over to, I'm going to switch it over to Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So Amanda really laid out very nicely for us the situation before we decided to explore an alternative to our supply business review process. And she also took you through some of the, the early challenges, some of the thoughts that we had, and the way in which we were able to transition from one model to another model. So I'll just talk to you briefly about some of the goals that we highlighted early in the day for ourselves. I'll talk to you a little bit more about some of the benefits that we're experiencing today as a result of the new model. And then just to give you some information on how easily transferable this process can be in your own situations, if there's anybody on the call, for example, who might be thinking of doing something similar. So during the first year or so of the revised business review process, we identified some goals for ourselves. And as Amanda mentioned, we had settled on a number, on a rhythm of doing 10, up to 10 suppliers for each session we were holding. So as a goal, we wanted to make contact, direct contact through these sessions with a minimum of around 270 vendors each year. And you would remember that when we were doing them one-on-one, we only were able to impact 36. So that's a significant increase. And that was a very aggressive goal, and we were able to meet it. And then outside of the group business reviews, which we're having, we also wanted to make contact with all of the other vendors on the contract. So for example, if we were looking at an IT contract, and let's say that contract had 15 vendors, and we were meeting with 10 of them, the remaining 5, we wanted to also be able to make contact, albeit in an asynchronous way. So those additional 5 vendors would also be receiving performance feedback. And we were able to do this through our partnership with Procurated, where we were able to share performance and compliance data with these vendors who were not attending the session. So as a result, 100% of our vendors on those contracts that we selected for review during a particular quarter were either synchronously or asynchronously impacted as a result of our session. And that was, for us, that was where we wanted to take our business reviews. That's where we wanted to take our vendor relationships, where we were always in contact with our vendors. We were always hearing from them, and we were also always sharing information with them. So as far as a rollout goal, one of the things, or a few of the things that we thought about if we were going to be successful, the first one was communication. We needed to be able to bring awareness about what we were doing to the folks that were going to be impacted. And those were primarily our vendors and our buyers. So we needed to communicate to our vendors, why was it that we were changing the way we were doing the business reviews? What was it going to be like? What was going to be the benefit for them? And what is the value that we were anticipating that we would add with this process, with this revised process? So Amanda talked a little bit about the vendor intake form that we used at the beginning of the process to solicit their interest. We wanted to hear from them what topics they wanted to talk about in the industry section, for example. It shouldn't be about us determining what the conversation should be about. It had to be something that was of interest to them, for us to be able to make it as meaningful for them as much as it was going to be meaningful for us. So we did that at the very beginning of our process. We asked them what were those things that were relevant to the contract that they want us to explore a little bit more. And we also asked them what were those topics that they wanted to lead. At the end of the day, it wasn't going to be about OSD and category management, just talking to those vendors. It was about how we were going to engage them in dialogue. And a part of that was allowing them to lead certain sections of the review process, which in a lot of instances, they were more than happy to do. So another part of what made it successful was that we had to change a little bit the resources that we used for presentation. So we revised and we revamped the presentation template, and we used that for all of our reviews. So we had consistent delivery. So the value that we were adding to the process, it was uniform and consistent across different sessions. And then we could not have done it in isolation. So we had some critical partnerships within our agency that we had to strengthen. We had to strengthen the partnership with our data analytics team, for example, because all of that performance data that Amanda talked about was now going to be very crucial for these sessions. So we needed to be able to get good, consistent data, up to date and relevant, so we can share with the vendors, both the vendors who were in the live sessions and those that we were going to impact asynchronously. So our data analytics team became very important for us as a partner in this process, as well as our climate and sustainability team that was able to not only provide us with good questions or themes for consideration for the industry discussion, but also who in a lot of instances actually showed up at these sessions and did parts of the presentation with us. So that was another, I would call it another spin-off benefit from this process, and one of the things that made it so successful, because it really allowed us to partner with those other key areas to guarantee the success. And of course, external partnerships with our other vendor partners. I mentioned before, our partnership with Procurated, so we could see how, so our vendors could see how the buyers were rating them. And some of the other benefits, one of the big benefits to this revised process was service improvement. We did learn a lot. And in addition to the learnings, we were able to make some immediate adjustments based on, discoveries, based on things that happened as a result of those conversations we were having. So for example, we had a number of sessions with our vendors in the vehicle space. And as a result of that, we saw that those vendors making adjustments on how to respond to changes in regulation just by our ability to talk through some of that with them in the sessions. And then we went through a period of supply chain disruptions. We talked about how they were able to ensure consistent supplies, how they were able to get some kind of regularity in their supply chain. And there were lots of information that was shared with vendors in the room. As Amanda mentioned, it was really like a learning experience for some of the smaller vendors in particular, on some of the industry norms and some of those things that they could employ to grant them success. So in the face of supply chain disruptions, we were able to maintain consistent supplies. There was a time when there was a plastic water bottle ban in the Commonwealth. The sizes 16 ounces and smaller. And we had to, get our vendors together again to talk about what were some of the alternatives that they could employ. And, quickly enough, we explored a lot of alternatives. We ended up with our vendors providing us with aluminum containers for the water, as well as paper. So, again, real practical solutions coming out of these sessions. And there were a number of others, when you talk about the autonomous machines in the janitorial industry. We talked about metrics for measuring recycled tonnage, and just increased vendor contacts overall are some of the benefits that we saw from a service standpoint from these sessions and from the transition. And then there was knowledge sharing. We learned a lot, and Amanda talked a little bit about some of these. The themes of tariffs. We spent a lot of time talking with our vendors about the impact of tariffs on their inputs, what they were seeing across their supply chain network, how did they anticipate that it was going to affect the goods and services that they were providing, the goods that they were providing to the Commonwealth and so on. And it was tremendous knowledge for us. We were able to inform some of our own internal policies based on some of this knowledge that we learned from our vendors. We learned a lot too around sustainable purchasing. What were the things they were looking into? The whole business of electric vehicles. We looked at pricing and the volatility in some industries of the pricing, especially in light of some of our geopolitical concerns now. We looked at some trends in our industry and so on. It was just a lot of knowledge that we got, a lot of knowledge that was shared. And, as was mentioned previously, one of the things that we talked long and hard about was how are we going to get our vendors to share some of these best practices, especially around pricing, how did they respond to price changes? How were they thinking about pricing in their own, in their own organizations? We thought a lot about how we were going to get vendors to be willing to share. And we found out that it wasn't as difficult as we thought it was going to be, that there are lots of instances when they are very willing to talk through some of these things, even with their competitors. And so one of the other areas that we benefited from on the next slide is savings and efficiencies. So it's very difficult for us to capture in dollar value, what it is that we have saved in terms, like I said, in dollar value, what it is that we have saved when we moved from the one vendor model to the multi-supplier model. But certainly in terms of efficiency, we can see the impact. So if we make the following assumptions, and if you follow along with this, very, very simple, maybe overly simple example, it will give you an idea as to the type of efficiencies that we're seeing. So if we assumed that it was taking us 3 hours to prepare and execute one business review session, right, under either approach, and if we also assume that we have a goal of impacting 300 suppliers in a year, then under the one vendor model, it would require about 900 staff hours for us to meet those targets. And I don't know about any of you on the call, but I know that that is somebody who is able to allocate 900 staff hours per year just for one process. And so it was just not feasible. And then when you look at the efficiencies that we were trying to achieve in terms of process, relationship building, and contract offerings, you know that we would not be able to realize it. We just didn't have 900 staff hours to dedicate to this. But under the multi-supplier model, it would require around 100 staff hours. So when you look at that comparison, it's not difficult for you to conclude that the multi-supplier model indeed is an attainable and sustainable model. And that's how we are measuring the efficiency of this process and what we're being able to save in terms of time. And so, I talked about transferability. You may be wondering, how difficult is it for me, for my state, for my organization, my agency, to move from what we're doing now, which I'm assuming could be a one vendor model, to a multi-supplier model? Not very difficult. In many instances, it does not require significant changes in your process or templates. It may not require significant changes to staff or staff hours. What it really does require is a different approach to preparation. The preparatory work, it looks a lot different. It's more involved, and you do need to make some adjustments to, especially in the beginning, to the material that you're going to use. Once you've made those adjustments, though, it's really just using it over time and maybe adjusting it as you go along. It also requires some thoughtful preparation with your suppliers. And Amanda mentioned this at the beginning. We're talking to our suppliers even before we get into these sessions, because we want to know from them, what is of interest to you? How do you want to participate? What are those things you want us to focus on? So they need to be involved in the process. It's not going to be, they're just going to show up and they're just going to hear from us. And that's not the idea. The idea is that they're going to be engaged. So the preparation with the suppliers, it starts from the very beginning. And that was a lot more different than how we did it before. Some of the other things that makes it easily transferable is that in our process redesign, we did not go outside of our standard Microsoft Office tools. We didn't need to invest in any kind of, additional tools or software or add-ons or anything like that. It was just Microsoft Forms, PowerPoint, Microsoft Teams, and our in-house data support, providing us with good data that we could use for the process. So from a cost perspective, it's an almost seamless transition for implementation. Again, it just requires a willingness to put in the preparation work, which the upfront work is a little bit more intense than it was. And then just to understand that if you want the success at the end, then the work needs to happen at the beginning. The learning curve for this process and its materials, it's also fairly short. So not too much of learnings in the beginning. So we like it in the Commonwealth. It's working well for our team. As Amanda mentioned, after each session in the beginning, we definitely talked about what went well. We brainstormed together about what didn't go so well, what we may need to change, and so on. And so now we have a fairly robust process that we've been working with and utilizing over the last year or so. And at the end of each session, we have a feedback form that we ask our vendors to use to provide us with great feedback, a part of the continuous improvements on our side, and just to keep the dialogue going. And this that you're seeing on the screen is actually some actual feedback that we pulled that we just wanted to share with this group today. Things like it was very comprehensive and it covered the topics in great details. Somebody said, I love the ability to have open dialogue and discussion with an open forum for questions and answers versus a straight presentation. It felt collaborative and informative. And that was our intention. It wasn't going to be a one-sided dialogue. Instead, it was going to be collaborative and informative. So it's, again, we can see that our vendors are also appreciating this change and this new model. So just some takeaways that I'll leave with you as we wrap up this session. For us, we found out that, solving the business review process, it wasn't about doing more. It wasn't about doing more reviews in terms of number of reviews, but it was about doing them better. We did not, as we mentioned before, we did not have the resources to do more of these sessions, but we certainly had the brain power to do them better. And that was what drove us to this new model that we're employing now. And what it has resulted in for us is a more comprehensive approach to managing supply relationships. Another one of the key takeaways for us is that with the right approach to solving a problem and the right strategy, even a lean team can maintain high standards. And our team is pretty lean, right? And I'm sure that a lot of you on this webinar today will say the same thing. It's really we're really operating with very lean teams. But it's all about how you approach your problem solving. When a challenge comes up, what are some of the things that you talk about? What are some of the things that you think about in order to solve that problem? Who are the folks who are involved in the conversation? For us, it was every person on the team who brainstormed together over a number of sessions, number of weeks to finally come up with the model that we have today. So when one of the things that we've used these sessions to do as well is to resolve any outstanding issues we have with current contracts. We use them to contemplate additional buyer and vendor training needs, and just in general to get feedback from the multiple stakeholders who are present at the table. So, it's used for a number of reasons. We get a number of benefits from the dialogue and from the exchange, and it really has allowed us to maintain the standards within our team around vendor relationship management that we wanted. And then finally, just some, just a sentence, just to encourage all of you who might be thinking of doing this, because I know that our supplier pools tend to be pretty big, and our resources sometimes do not quite match that. But don't ever get daunted by the big numbers. Instead, think big towards the solutions. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chadwick for any questions.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. I'd like to continue the discussion on a few topics. So your suppliers, they participate in these group reviews on a voluntary basis. So they opt into this format. Do they still have the ability to maybe ask for a one-on-one meeting, maybe if it involves something like correctional action or some sort of performance struggles? Like, how is that handled?
Yeah, so for our findings, when we moved to the bigger sessions, so the 10 vendor sessions, we still allowed our vendors to request a one-on-one if they had anything after the business review that they wanted to discuss directly with the category managers, that they had an opportunity to do so. And that was for all the vendors that we provided the session for.
Awesome. Could you tell me again, talk a little bit about how you prepared the suppliers for the new format? Like, what was the strategy behind getting them ready for this kind of change? And what kind of initial reactions did you get?
Yeah. And Maria, do you want to take that one, or
Sure, I can take it. So it was different. It was a lot different from what they were accustomed to. Those of them who had been part of the one-on-one, because like we mentioned before, we were only able to impact 36 per year. So it wasn't, it wasn't a tremendous, it was less than 5% of the vendor pool. But it was different. And so our early in the day, our communication out to those vendors was about the why. It was about why we were deciding to make the changes that were happening within our agency, within our team, how we were planning to expand our supply relationship management, and how it would benefit them. Because at the end of the day, folks want to know what is it in it for me. And so we had to prepare them for that. So it was over a series of different communications that we were able to, inform our vendors. And then when we decided to roll it out, like we talked about, that initial intake form, that also gave them lots of information about how the process was going to work, how they were going to, participate, how did we go about the selection, and inviting their own thoughts in the process as well. And like we said, at the end of it, inviting their feedback on how it went, what were some of the things that we could do differently, what are some of the things that they thought they were going to see that they didn't see, and so on. And we use that information to continue to improve the process and the program as we go along.
Looks like we've got a question that came in the chat. If you could tell us again about how you present the contract performance data in the group setting, where maybe protecting the identity or the performance of individual suppliers, from seeing each other's scores.
Yeah. So for our slide deck in general, we pull all the information, sales data, compliance, and we populate it into our slide deck. So we're going from the first slide, which is talking about like overview of the whole contract. Then we go into like each fiscal year of this past year. And then we kind of get into like who's buying from our contracts. And then we get into vendors, like which vendors on the call are higher spend and lower spend or anything like that. We always provide them in advance a unique identifier. So there's no way another vendor would know which vendor's which on the call. So it's protected. They feel like it's a safer environment for them, and they can just take it as a learning at where they are, because they'll be able to understand where they are when we provide that unique identifier in advance.
Looks like we've got another question that's come in. Have you seen, I'm guessing, increased utilization of contracts that you've implemented this business review approach on?
Maria, do you want to take that one?
So contract utilization for us is measured by buyer participation. From a vendor perspective, what we've seen is an increase in our ability to work through some of our issues with our vendors. And sometimes it has led to a vendor who had no business or very little business under the contract now finding ways to navigate that and to be more successful in terms of getting work under the contract. So from that regard, we've definitely seen an increase in utilization. But like I said, from the buyer's perspective, typically you measure utilization on our contract, or at least for us, by our buyer participation. This program is specifically geared for impact to our vendors. And so what we've seen, like I said before, is increased participation of our vendors in these programs, and in some instances, improving their position under the contract from low sales to higher sales, or maybe from no sales to now having sales on the contract.
Excellent. And your buyers are still present in these meetings. They are still at the table, still working on those relationships as well. We've got a question that came in. How would you, do you have any suggestions around maybe tailoring this approach for smaller local government operations, maybe procurement teams of like 3 or less?
Yeah. I think that, Oh, you can go. It's okay.
I, I'll follow you. Go ahead.
I was just gonna suggest because when we were looking at this and we were trying to figure out what's the best way to identify our vendors, I think starting there to see who you want to talk to first, um, and identifying your key suppliers for your contracts that you currently have, and then what number you're comfortable with for how many vendors you want to invite. We found a happy medium with 10. That might be 5 for you, or even like 3. It just depends on the take and the approach that you're willing to put the time into too, and what's available to you. And then Anne Marie, you can go.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Amanda. It really is for smaller teams. I remember we started out with a team of 9, so it's not. I mean, 9 is bigger than 3, but it's not in the grand scheme of things. It's not that much bigger. What I would say to you is similar to what Amanda said. Identify where the key areas of interest are, focus and start there. 10 people, 10 vendors to one contract manager for us worked well, right? So even with your team of 3, you are able to cover a lot of your vendors in a shorter space of time. And we're doing them once per quarter. You may want to do them monthly, or you may want to do them bi-monthly, which will even increase your own frequency, and the participation of your vendors, more of your vendors in this program. So start off with identifying where are the key areas. Maybe it's a particular industry, that has come up more than not for you in recent times, or maybe it's just a group of vendors that you want to start off with. But identify where the need is best or the need is most first, and start there. Start big, and if you feel like it's too much, like we did, and we pulled back, you can do that too. But it's really, really easy to get started. And once you get started, you can make the changes as you go along.
That's a great answer. Um, so let's we've got some questions around buyer participation. Um, did you have to like really push or promote the buyers to get involved, or how did you encourage those the contract end users, the purchasers to want to adopt this approach as well?
Yeah, I can start. I'll start where we came from, and then Anne Marie, if you want to talk to where we are at now, that would be good. So where we came from, we had an Excel that we would share with our buyers, and how we identified our buyers. We go back to our data and see like our top buyers or the highest departments that were under that, or maybe even growth opportunities with those smaller sales. And then with our networking, we would find the buyers and reach out to them directly. We could also go through our e-procurement system, Combis, to see them and get their contact information. And then we would just kind of do some outreach and aim to get at least like around 10, and then provide that feedback to our vendors when we go, or to our vendor at the time. And we would discuss that with them, and we'd give them a rated scorecard of that and any action items that they have to take after that. But if Anne Marie wants to talk to what we do currently.
Yeah, it's not easy to always get your buyers into these conversations, but it's important. And as Amanda said, when we started out, we were making outreach, even though initially they were not a part of the process, they weren't physically showing up at the meetings. They were still providing us with feedback. So we would send, surveys, questionnaires to them and ask them for feedback on the particular vendor or vendors that we were going to talk with. And then we would use that feedback as a point of discussion in the business review meetings. And now what we're doing is we're asking our buyers to come in themselves and to have an opportunity to talk with the vendors about some of the issues they may be having, or just anything they'd like to explore. And so again, we've had to be strategic about that engagement. So for example, if there's a contract that has, a particular buyer concern, we're talking to those buyers. They had a concern with a particular thing on a con. Oh, come and talk with the vendors. We're going to have these vendors at a session. You'll have an opportunity to explore that idea or that thought or so on with them. There was one instance where there were a group of buyers who wanted to add a new product line onto a contract, and the vendors were going to be in the room. So come in and talk with them and explore the possibility, see if it's something that would be an easy addition or so on. And so that's how you kind of get your buyers in. Find something that's of relevance to them, something that they feel like they could benefit from, and then market that to them, that will be a part of the conversation. And then it's easier for you to get them to come in and to share in the dialogue.
Just a couple more to wrap it up. Do you say this approach has given you better insight into industries and your suppliers' supply chains?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Some of the conversations that we would get into in a business review was always very unique. It feels like I can remember off the top of my head, and I know some of my team members are on the call too, that we were doing a pest control contract, and we were talking about one vendor brought up like birth control for rats, and that was it was very interesting conversation because that's not a normal conversation you would have every day. But it's a big problem, especially after COVID. Like rats and mice and any other pests were rampant. So it's a very realistic conversation for them. And so we got to jump into that. But Anne Marie can elaborate on maybe a more serious one. So.
Maybe not the rats and the birth control, but certainly we have gone into a number of supply chain just transparency and issues and so on. When you talked about tariffs, you talk about their inputs. Vendors are sharing with us like where are their component parts coming from. Who are their sources of supply. Have they considered alternatives that maybe provide them with an escape from the tariffs and so on. And it's just like I said, just the willingness to share, because sometimes what you might think is proprietary, it really isn't. It's just industry common knowledge, and they don't mind sharing it. And one of the other things that we found out is that vendors, they typically know each other. So they're not completely strangers coming into a room. Oftentimes they know each other or they know of each other's businesses. And so it doesn't tend to get tense or anything like that. And there's a willingness to share and to go deeper. And especially if we're prepared for the conversation and they're also prepared for the conversation, they will share more with us. And, we found that, like I said, we've learned quite a bit about their supply chain strategies and mitigation strategies and, how they're avoiding disruptions and so on just from these conversations.
Well, I think that puts us right at time. I want to thank you guys so much for bringing all this information and sharing it and working with us here at NASPO to bring it to our audience today. Thank you all for attending this webinar today. You'll all receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and materials. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for your continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be available for viewing on the NASPO YouTube page in the coming days. Questions entered into the chat and the Q&A boxes have been saved, and we'll try and follow up via email for any ones that we might not have been able to get to during the presentation. Don't forget to check out the upcoming webinars and other events at naspo.org. For instance, you could join us next Thursday, February 19th for Smarter Service, Safer Contracts, Transforming State Procurement with Dual AI Agents, where you'll get to hear from Anne Maria and Amanda's colleagues on their implementation of AI tools for the Commonwealth's procurement. And while you're at it, go ahead and register for the final webinar in the Cronin webinar series on Thursday, February 26th for Beyond the Internship, Building Purpose, Passion, and Public Service through PAC App, and that's with North Carolina. So thanks again to our wonderful presenters, Anne Maria Bennett, Amanda Ferdinand. Thank you to our guests and everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for
We'll see you
having
next
us.
time.
Take care. Bye-bye.